Welcome to the Icicle Mountaineering Key Knots and Ropework session. We're going to start with how to tie onto a rope. The most common way of tying onto the rope is a knot called the single figure of 8 that is then rethreaded through the harness. So we'll start by doing a single figure of 8 before we move on to tying onto the harness. To tie the knot, pull through about 40 to 50 centimeters of rope, pass it across the rope that's dangling down, round the back, and then down through the hole, making an 8 shape. Just to redo it again, pull through the rope, pass it across the main rope, round the back, and down through the hole. Now we're going on to the next stage, which is how to thread it onto a harness. You'll see here the climber tying a single figure of 8, exactly the same as before, and passing it through both the leg and waist loops of the harness to join the two together before they start to rethread it. So to get the right length of rope, pull through roughly a metre, tie your figure of 8. You'll find that it's easy to adjust up and down the rope, like so. Then pass the rope through leg loop, waist loop, bring the single figure of 8 close up to the harness, and then start to retrace exactly where the 8 goes from the harness away, right the way around, until the rope is exiting down the main rope to your climbing partner, with a good tail of about 20 centimeters left dangling there. You can adjust it and so it's nice and snug to the harness. If you're going to be climbing inside or rock climbing, it's most common to do the rethreaded figure of 8 with a stopper knot. So a stopper knot's also called a fisherman's knot. You rethread the figure of 8 exactly the same as before, but with a slightly longer tail, and then the stopper knot is basically a blocker knot that is protecting you in case the figure of 8 is incorrectly tied, and to stop the extra length dangling down and potentially tripping you up. It's adjusted snug against the figure of 8 as so. And just slowly to do the stopper knot, it's going around twice, round the rope, and then down and through both loops and adjusted snug to the knot. When you want to make safe on a mountain, there's various knots that you could use. A figure of 8 that we've already discussed on a bight, as in on the end of a loop, is one of the easiest ways to attach a rope to the mountainside if you're creating a fixed line, for example. Just take a doubled up section of rope and do a single figure of 8, but with 2 strands of rope at all stages, and that can be clipped into an anchor point. So pull through roughly 50-60 centimeters of rope, bunch the rope together, create an upper loop round the front, round the back, and down through the hole, exactly the same, and then just adjust it tight, pulling on both strands of rope separately to dress the knot. A more adjustable version of that is the Clove hitch. The Clove hitch is made by making one loop, a second loop exactly the same on top, and then passing the top loop behind the other and clipping that onto a carabiner. So one loop, a second loop, and then passing the upper loop, almost as if in 2D rather than 3D, no folding or twisting, but just tucked one behind the other to clip onto a carabiner. Round, round again, and the top tucked behind the first one and clipped into the carabiner. The big advantage of the Clove hitch is that it's an adjustable knot. So to adjust it, make your Clove hitch exactly the same as before, clip it into a lock-in carabiner. You can tighten either side, as so, and adjust it by pulling the cross thread to either make yourself further away or closer to the anchor point as you wish. So make the 2 loops exactly the same as before, one on top of the other, pass one behind the other, clip it onto your carabiner, pull it tight. On either strand will lock off, and then if you wish to adjust it, pull the cross thread and either take in on whichever side you want some spare slack. If you're climbing at a higher level, you may wish to do the Clove hitch one-handed. In this case, you'd clip into a carabiner, and like so, can use just one hand that's available to actually make the knot direct onto the carabiner to make you safe. And it can be adjusted. So clip on through the gate of the carabiner, reach round on the shoulder side, the back side of the carabiner, twist the rope back on itself, and then translate that loop onto the front of the carabiner to clip it in. And again, you can adjust it, pulling the cross thread if you want it to be closer to the anchor. We now move on to knots for rope control, raising and lowering. The most common is the Italian or Munter hitch. To make this, we start off as very similar to the start of the Clove hitch, making 2 loops, but rather than passing one behind the other, we fold them together like closing a book, and clip both loops through a locking carabiner. You'll see that the knot is completely reversible around the carabiner, like so, and so can be used for raising or lowering a load or a climber. Make one loop, another loop on top, and then fold both loops together to clip into the carabiner. With the Italian hitch, it's important to always use a big screw gate carabiner to allow a wide section for it to turn around. We now move on to the Garda Hitch, which is sometimes called the Alpine Clutch knot. As you can see from this, the ropes run through both carabiners, round the base and down through the first one again. In this case, the load is on the left hand side and to take in through the middle, and it locks off in an auto belaying fashion. So to make it, run the rope through both carabiners, round the base and down through the first one, in this case the purple carabiner, that being the dead rope or the belay rope, and the load being on the left hand side. Now we move on to safety backup, abseils and lines. The most common kind of Prusik is the French Prusik. To make this, you offset the sewn or tied part of your Prusik loop at the base and wrap the Prusik round the rope. In this case, generally 5 turns right the way around the rope works for most diameters of cord and rope. The ends will finish on opposing sides and clip them together using a screw gate carabiner. When the Prusik is loaded, it locks on the rope, and when it's unloaded, it slides easily up and down the rope, depending on which direction you're travelling. So again, to tie that, offset the sewn or tied section, wrap it round the rope, generally 4 or 5 turns, clip the 2 ends together with a screw gate carabiner. When it's under load, it will lock. The classic Prusik is another kind of Prusik. Offset the middle of the Prusik on one side of the rope and pass the tied or sewn section through it 3 or 4 times through the middle, dress the knot. The load can be applied on the sewn or tied section exactly the same as with the French auto block Prusik. So pass it through the middle again, through the middle again, and that is the load that's applied. It locks on the rope. The Klemheist is the third kind of Prusik to go through. To make this, wrap your Prusik down the rope, round and round, generally 4 or 5 times again. Once you reach the base, pass the tied or sewn bit up, through the other end of the Prusik, and down so that it locks. It makes a one-directional Prusik, but has a high efficiency and locks very well on the rope. It's good for backing up abseils, or in the case of crevasse rescue, if you're moving along a line near the edge of a crevasse. Again, wrap the Prusik round and round the rope, past the bottom, up through the top, and lock down for the friction and for the load. The last Prusik is the Tresse Prusik, which is great for winter climbing or if there are fixed lines or frozen ropes. Lay a sling halfway along a section of rope, cross the sections of slings behind the rope and in front and behind, crisscrossing each time that they pass behind the rope and in front of the rope. So it's making a series of crisscrosses all the way down, somewhat similar to plaiting hair. Once you get to the end of your Prusik, you'll find that, or the end of your sling in this case, clip both ends together with a locking carabiner and load the Prusik. As you load it, all these crisscrosses are pressure points on the main rope and it locks. If you want to release it, you'll find that you can just release it quite easily with very little pressure on the top. So it's a very useful kind of Prusik that you might want in a situation where you need to release it under load. So you need to be very careful on its use.